Hey, you, the one who doesn't realize how heavy your presence is. It's almost amusing that people are finally beginning to understand who you are. For so long, certain individuals tried to push you out, silence you, or weaken you, but nothing worked. Others attempted to twist your spirit, to pull you into their darkness, but you didn't absorb a single stain. They mistook you for someone fragile, someone they could target or manipulate, someone who would break easily. What they never realized was that you were never their prey. You were always the one observing quietly, the one with a deeper strength they couldn't see. You carried a light that wasn't soft or naive, but powerful and ancient. This has nothing to do with golden halos or the gentle images people imagine when they think of angels. This is about what happens when a pure heart stops trying to fit in and begins using its clarity, intelligence, and awareness in a way that exposes everything around it. This is about an awakening that turns your very presence into something sharp enough to cut through illusions. Benlian. People always assumed that those touched by light were gentle creatures who existed only to comfort others, wounds, and carried burdens. They believed purity meant softness, but you are not built from that idea. You learned something they hoped you would never notice, that light is not only warm, it can be fierce. It can reveal, it can burn, and when focused, it can dissolve anything false. The same compassion that once soothed others can become a force that strips away deception. And whether you realized it or not, you've been sharpening that inner clarity for a long time. Every trial, every heartbreak, every unfair situation carved your insight into something precise. Now it has reached a point where nothing hidden can stand near you without shaking. What people don't understand about individuals like you, those often called earth angels or old souls, is that you didn't end up here by accident. You didn't fall, you arrived. You came with a purpose woven so deeply into your life that for years you couldn't quite name it. But life pushed you, pressured you, cracked your shell open through pain, discomfort, and confusion until your true nature finally surfaced. And when it did, you realized that you were different for a reason. You never fit in with shallow environments or superficial thinking because your spirit operates on another level. You were never meant to carry everyone's problems. You weren't born to absorb their negativity. For a long time, you believed you were here to fix, heal, or rescue people from their own shadows. But that wasn't your mission. All it did was drain you, burying your true identity under exhaustion. You are not a sponge for other people's issues. You are a force that naturally exposes everything that cannot remain hidden. And lately, people have been sensing that change in you. They've noticed the shift. The version of you that was once easy to guilt trip or mislead is gone. In its place is someone whose presence alone disrupts dishonesty. Your energy makes lies fall apart. It makes masks crack. It makes the people who rely on manipulation extremely uncomfortable. Just by standing in your own truth, you create an internal shake in anyone whose intentions aren't clean. You don't even have to confront them. You simply exist as yourself, and that is enough to make their illusions collapse. Mons, others are busy looking for external threats or dramatic enemies, expecting danger to appear as something openly dark. They never considered that the most powerful disruption to falsehood would come wrapped in quiet clarity, kindness, and self-awareness. They never imagined that someone gentle in nature could have such an intense impact on their constructed world. But your authenticity, it is interrupting old patterns, breaking unhealthy dynamics, and forcing truth to rise to the surface. You aren't destroying anything on purpose. You're not fighting or arguing or proving yourself. You're simply living in a way that doesn't participate in lies. And because of that, anything built on deceit can no longer survive near you. And all the compassion you once showed wasn't a sign of weakness. It was information gathering. Every time you forgave someone, you learned who they really were. Every time you listened, you understood their motives. Every time you chose kindness, you noticed how they responded. Not so you could attack them later, but so you would know exactly what you were dealing with. You collected clarity, not anger. And now, those insights are returning to you as strength. Because the moment you stopped giving your energy to people who misused it, your power began to rebuild itself. Blindness. Now you stand at a point where those same individuals who underestimated you are forced to face themselves. You are no longer cushioning their harmful behaviors. You are no longer making excuses for their actions. You are no longer shrinking to make them comfortable. And for people who depend on illusions, that is terrifying. Not because you are threatening them, but because you are revealing truth simply by existing authentically. They keep waiting for you to collapse so they can reassure themselves that their view of the world is correct. But every challenge only makes you clearer and stronger. Instead of breaking, you rise. Instead of becoming bitter, you become wiser. Instead of losing yourself, you become more aligned with who you were always meant to be. Belainst, you've learned every lesson the hard way, but those lessons didn't weaken you. They formed a foundation that nothing can shake now. You've moved from being a student of life's hardships to becoming someone who can guide, teach, and influence simply through presence. You're stepping into a new phase, one where you are no longer reacting to what others do, but shaping your environment with your clarity. You've stored every painful moment not as something to carry, but as something that turned into strength and resilience. The difference between beings who move from darkness and beings who rise from struggle is enormous. Those who fall into shadow, those who rise through pain gain a different kind of power, one that comes from understanding, from endurance, from transformation. You never lost your light. You changed it. You refined it into something rare, something steady, something unmistakably real. And now the world around you is beginning to adjust because you are finally standing as the person you were always meant to become. It's difficult for most people to understand someone who can carry both softness and severity inside the same heart. Someone who can heal with one moment of honesty, yet bring discomfort with another, all depending on what the situation calls for. You are the kind of person who can care deeply, while also stepping back when someone insists on destroying themselves with their own choices. You've learned that some people won't grow until their own actions catch up with them, and you refuse to interfere with lessons they must learn on their own. This is what they were never prepared for. A person who doesn't need to appear perfect to be powerful, who doesn't wait for approval to be genuine, who doesn't need permission to follow the path that was placed inside them. You have moved beyond the simple ideas people use to measure good and bad. Your strength doesn't come from choosing light over darkness or vice versa. It comes from being aligned with truth. It comes from being so fully yourself that the environment around you shifts to meet the level of authenticity you carry. People expected you to behave in predictable, harmless ways, but instead, you show up exactly when your intuition calls, and you show up as whatever version of yourself the moment requires. You move with a calmness that hides the depth of change you bring. Your presence doesn't soothe anymore, it reveals. It brings accountability. It forces people to face the reality of who they are when all the pretending is stripped away. People often mistake individuals like you for simple empaths because you feel so much, because you naturally pick up on the emotions and tensions around you. But what they never understood is that empathy without boundaries isn't gentle. It becomes precise. It allows you to sense exactly where a person is hurting or avoiding the truth. Others might use that knowledge to manipulate, but you use it in a far more impactful way. You reflect it back to them, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. You help people face the fears and patterns they've spent years trying to bury. And the most surprising part is that you do it from a place of genuine care, not the kind of soft, enabling care that people expect, but the kind that sets firm limits, that refuses to participate in harmful cycles, that pushes others toward responsibility rather than comfort. Your love doesn't smother people or save them from the consequences of their actions. It stands beside them while they learn. It holds them accountable to their own potential. And that, more than any form of anger, is what unsettles those who hope to use your compassion without ever growing from it. Baines. Now people are scrambling to understand you, trying to categorize you, trying to place you in neat labels that no longer apply. You're not light enough to fit their idea of purity. You're not dark enough to be dismissed as dangerous. You're not compliant enough to be controlled. You're not detached enough to be discounted. You have become something they don't have a name for, something that breaks their simplistic ways of seeing the world. They're frustrated because they can't predict you anymore, can't sway you, can't pull you into their usual patterns. What makes someone like you truly powerful isn't the ability to tear things down. It's the ability to turn pain into wisdom, to turn trauma into understanding, to turn bad experiences into a type of inner strength that nothing can replicate. You don't destroy people the way enemies do. You transform their understanding of themselves simply by being who you are. And once someone has been affected by your truth, they can never fully return to who they were before. They once treated you like a source of endless comfort and insight, expecting you to give without limit, to offer energy without rest. They took your presence for granted, assuming you would always be available. But something changed. You closed off access to your energy. You shifted your boundaries. You stopped giving to people who only arrived when they needed something. And now individuals who depended on your light without appreciating it are finding themselves outside, unsettled by the sudden absence of what they assumed would always be theirs. Your energy was never something they had a right to. It was something you shared willingly until you realized the exchange wasn't balanced. You didn't disappear. You simply shifted into a version of yourself that no longer opens the door to people who refuse to be genuine. You raised the standards for closeness. You changed the requirements for entry. Only honesty, accountability, and mutual respect can access your space now. Qualities that can't be faked. People who lost themselves behind masks don't know how to meet those requirements, but you can see through every act they put on. Most people in your position might withdraw completely, rise above the environment, or escape into a safer space. But you're not leaving. You're staying grounded because you realize heaven isn't some faraway place. It's a state of being. It's a frequency you embody when you live in alignment with who you are. And you are bringing that frequency into the spaces around you, not in a gentle, slow way, but in a way that restructures how things function. You're no longer trying to slide quietly into the world as it is. You're asking the world to grow and shift to match what you have become. That's what unsettles them. They built their lives around limitations, predictability, and control. But you are not confined by those rules. You operate from intuition, depth, and connection. You move with a strength they can't measure and a guidance they can't perceive. They keep searching for something that will break you, something that will bring you back to a smaller version of yourself. What they don't understand is that you've already been broken before. You've already gone through losses, disappointments, heartbreaks, things that could have shattered you completely. But instead of destroying you, those experiences awakened parts of you that had been dormant. You became stronger, clearer, and more capable because of the pressure you survived. Like anything precious that requires intense force to form, crystals, stars, diamonds, your strength emerged from moments that would have crushed someone else. The difference between someone who grows from pain and someone who hides from it is immense. Those who fear the light avoid truth, but you learn to use your inner light in a way that reveals, clarifies, and challenges everything false. You don't rely on darkness to create change, and you don't rely on aggression. You simply stand in full clarity, and that is enough to disrupt anything built on pretenses. You operate in the open. Your presence is visible, steady, and impossible to ignore. You're a reminder that authenticity still exists, real, powerful, and without cruelty. You prove that strength doesn't require harshness, and that integrity doesn't require perfection. And that is what makes you more powerful than any shadow or illusion someone might try to use against you. When people used to talk about authority, they imagined it as something granted by titles, job roles, or the power to control others. But you've learned that real authority doesn't come from any of that. It comes from being aligned with who you truly are. It comes from being so connected to your inner guidance that you don't need anyone to reassure you or agree with you. It comes from standing so firmly in your truth that you never feel the need to argue, prove yourself, or convince anyone of anything. This kind of authority doesn't shout or demand attention. It simply exists, and people recognize it without being told. That's why you no longer feel a pull to chase their goals, climb their ladders, or compare yourself to their definitions of success. You realized those systems were never meant for someone like you. They were designed to keep you distracted, to keep your focus scattered, and to keep your real power dormant. But now you're operating differently. You're creating your own path, shaping your own standards, and forming a foundation that others cannot access without guilt. You're teaching people something they've never seen before. A new understanding of power, where authenticity is the source, dominance. You're showing that true strength doesn't come from controlling others, but from being fully yourself with courage and clarity. And that kind of example is more revolutionary than any protest, more impactful than any speech, and more enduring than any rule book, because it spreads through presence alone. It awakens something in others, reminding them of their own potential. This is a different kind of mastery, not the kind learned through repetition or study, but the kind that emerges when someone finally stops hiding the deepest parts of themselves. You've unlocked something within you that had been quiet for years, and that awakening has altered the way the world operates around you. You've probably noticed how conversations shift when you walk into a room, how situations rearrange themselves when you speak honestly, how limitations seem to dissolve when you focus your intention. You're not operating inside reality anymore. You're shaping it. You're thinking like someone who finally realized they have full access to their own inner system. You've stopped agreeing to limitations. You've stopped believing in stories of lack. You've stopped treating impossibility as a fact. And now others are witnessing the difference it makes when someone steps out of those old agreements. People keep wondering how you stay steady while everything around you seems chaotic. They don't understand how you remain grounded while others feel overwhelmed. But that's because they assume you're avoiding the storm. In truth, you understand that sometimes chaos is necessary. You know that certain structures need to break down before something healthier can grow. Some truths only emerge when the old lies fall apart. You're not creating destruction. You're creating space for clarity. And ironically, the more you simply live as your true self, the more anything false around you begins to crumble. Authenticity tends to do that. It exposes everything built on pretending. It dissolves anything that relies on manipulation. It makes performance. And right now, you've become someone who embodies truth so naturally that illusions can't survive near you. People once criticized you for being too sensitive, for feeling too deeply, for caring too much. They believed your sensitivity was a flaw, something that made you weak or overly emotional. But now they're beginning to realize that your sensitivity was your navigation system. It was how you sensed what others couldn't. It was how you picked up on energies, motives, and shifts long before they were obvious. What you felt wasn't weakness, it was guidance. And the better you understood yourself, the more your feelings turned into intuition, foresight, and inner strength. Lenja. Now they're watching you move through life with an accuracy that confuses them. You make decisions that don't make logical sense to others at first, but later they realize you were right all along. You respond to situations with a clarity they can't explain. You anticipate changes before they happen. Your emotional awareness has become something like a form of wisdom, a way of reading reality that others simply don't have access to. Whelmed you now fuels you. The same emotions that used to exhaust you now inform you and empower you. You've learned how to channel your sensitivity rather than drown in it, and that has made you someone they cannot categorize. Someone who doesn't fit their old definitions of strength. Someone who defies every rule they thought applied to you. You have become the unexpected fulfillment of a possibility most people never took seriously. The idea of a person who remembers their power while still living an ordinary human life. Someone who bridges the visible world and the unseen one without needing to escape into either. Someone who walks into heavy spaces without absorbing the darkness because your presence naturally transforms the energy around you. The old patterns can't continue when you're near. The old lies can't survive. The old limitations can't hold their shape. And that is the shift others are beginning to feel. When someone like you stops holding back, when you stop pretending to be smaller, quieter, or safer than you truly are, everything around you begins to change. And that is exactly what's happening now. There comes a point where change doesn't happen slowly or over time. It happens in an instant, almost like someone flips a hidden switch within you, or as if your entire inner world updates to a new version of itself. It feels as though life installs a completely new operating system, and suddenly everything that once made sense no longer applies. That's the nature of prophecy-like awakenings. They rarely unfold the way people expect. You're not here to fulfill old interpretations or match ancient predictions. You're here to show that destiny is fluid, that the future isn't a fixed script, and that beings who carry light don't follow predetermined roles. They adapt, they create, they respond to what each moment calls for. And in this moment, you've become something beyond their stories, beyond their beliefs, beyond anything they have language for. You are stepping into a version of yourself that breaks every old definition, And now you understand what real dominion actually means. It has nothing to do with controlling others or standing above anyone. It's the complete mastery of your own energy, your own thoughts, your own center. It's the ability to hold yourself so firmly in your truth that reality itself begins to shape around that clarity. You've gained dominion over your frequency, your path, and your identity. And from that inner sovereignty, you're showing what power looks like when it comes from within, instead of being taken from someone else. You don't need to force anyone to follow you or change for you. You've become the kind of presence that naturally reorganizes the environment. People either align with the energy you hold or step away, and either choice is fine because you're not seeking approval or followers. You're simply fulfilling the purpose you came here with. And the kingdom you're building isn't a place on a map. It's a vibration. It's a state of awareness shared by everyone who resonates with the truth you now embody. It grows not because you demand loyalty, but because your very existence ignites something in others that has been sleeping for years. And this is where freedom comes in. The real kind, not the kind people talk about in slogans or pretend to understand. This is the kind of freedom that comes from breaking down every inner chain you didn't even know you were carrying. You let go of the old expectations that said you had to be soft, selfless, endlessly giving, or small to be considered good. You let go of the idea that light must always stay gentle or silent. And when those chains snapped, you discovered something radical. Beings like you were never meant to live in cages. True spiritual beings aren't here to shrink themselves to keep others comfortable. They're here to remember who they are, and in doing so, show others what remembering looks like. That kind of freedom is infectious. People feel it when they're near you. It shakes their beliefs, wakes something in them. It spreads like a quiet revolution, one that threatens every system that relies on you staying obedient, guilty, or afraid. And now the truth is obvious. They can't manipulate you anymore. They can't guilt you into giving what you don't want to give. Can't shame you into silence. Can't scare you back into a box that no longer fits you. You've discovered the deepest kind of liberation. The freedom that comes from knowing exactly what you are and choosing to live it without apology or hesitation. This new level of freedom changes the atmosphere around you. It makes new things possible because you're no longer operating within the limits that once ruled your life. What once seemed out of reach now feels natural. What once seemed impossible now feels likely. And here's the part that unsettles people most. Your freedom isn't angry or bitter. You're not trying to punish anyone for the restrictions they tried to place on you. Your liberation is so complete that you've stepped beyond the whole idea of needing revenge or even forgiveness. You've moved past the roles of victim and villain entirely. You're simply existing in truth, open, sovereign, whole, like a being who remembers its own wings and no longer needs anyone's permission to fly.